assume as you know, the kind of white culture started to blend in and the communities kind of developed, I'm assuming that's probably when the health started to kind of take a turn, the foods that they
Yeah,
were eating
so
started to change.
on the health front, like it did start really the origin of chronic disease started with missionaries coming into Arnhem Land, because in setting up the communities, they relied on rations as a source of extra food, and the government was paying rations to these missionary communities, and so that's flour, sugar, tea, and tobacco. That's what rations are. And initially, this was supplementing the diet. And a lot of people's kids at this stage, they actually grew a lot bigger than they were. The Yolngu people traditionally were very thin and muscular, with a really skinny build. And with the supplementation of rations, initially the next generation was actually growing a lot taller, but they were still relying heavily on their traditional foods. There simply just wasn't enough rations to have a major impact on health and chronic disease. But then we got the shift from those limited rations to people being paid a salary, and those rations being diversified in a store setting. And this is where people started to get very confused about the value of different foods. Suddenly, the value of food like syrup, familiar with syrup, where golden syrup.
Yeah, sure, probably a little different, but yeah, I mean, like very sweet, kind of like thick.
Yeah.
Similar.
Yes. Yeah, coming from, it would have been from sugarcane production in Australia, so it's a thick golden molassesy type food, and people would actually use their money to store this food up. So sweet things and easy access foods like flour became highly valued and valued above and beyond traditional foods, because this was the sophisticated white fella food, right? And it was easily available. It tasted absolutely amazing, because where in the natural world did you get anything that sweet? They would have traditional native honey once a year if they're lucky. So this Western food had a kind of shine to it, having been brought in without any real understanding of the lack of nutrition it contained.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Mentioning the traditional diet, what was their more traditional diet in the like, obviously like whole foods and what grows there, but do you know, like, could you take an estimate of like animal foods versus plant foods, and
Yeah,
how
sure.
seasonal were the plant foods? Like, what did the traditional diet look like?
So first of all, it was quite seasonal, and it's very much a feast and fast type scenario for them, where there's seasons of plenty and seasons of limited access to food. And of course, that varies, would traditionally vary year to year on how what was available, you know. But I'm just I want to get the figures right. So yeah, so the literature suggests that animal foods were about 64% of the diet, 65%, and plant foods were in the range of 30-35% of the diet. So very dominated by animal foods. And people would only eat the animal foods according to the season when they were rich in fat. In fact, if you caught something that didn't have a significant amount of fat in it, then if you had an alternative, you would not eat that food. I mean, I've literally seen people catch large sharks, stingrays in season, and they will cut them open, look at their liver, and if the liver isn't white and full of fat, which is where these animals store their fats, unlike mammals, then they would just leave it on the beach. And it seems illogical to us, but if they were confident that they could get something else, they would go and get something else, because it just, under their traditional knowledge, it's just not worth eating that protein-rich meal without the fat source.
Fascinating. Wow. I mean, that's what you hear from all kinds of anthropologists. When it comes to large animals, we overhunted all the large animals because they were easy to hunt, and we prioritized them because they had all the fat. And that was a big thing that helped our evolution. So that is fascinating that you mentioned that, that they would specifically look for the fatness of the animal as the number one priority.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, the traditional rules that were in play. And if you look at that plant side of things, so the foods that provided any real degree of carbohydrates would have been fruits, nuts, and tubers. And tubers were the largest source of carbohydrates. So there were certain times in the year and certain years when tubers would be more readily available. So you'd have things like traditional yams, bush yams. These are all really high in resistant starch as well, which means that they're digested in the gut, and they're actually producing butyrates and medium chain fatty acids in the gut, as well as providing quick source of carbohydrates from the stomach. So very different to a lot of the modern starchy foods. And they taste amazing. I mean,
really,
these things are fantastic to eat. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You hear about some of these tubers where they're so fibrous you can only like kind of chew them and extract them, and then you have to like take out the fibrous part. But this is I guess a little bit more like a traditional yam where you can consume it and eat it when it's prepared.
It would taste something similar to a Fijian yam, which are very large and very starchy, but the starch is more compact, like it's very, very dense. So it has a texture a little bit more like a carrot. So somewhere between a carrot and a potato in its texture. Very thick, but a really rich, nutty flavor.
Interesting.
And the other thing that was really plentiful in terms of plants is the water chestnut. So once a year you would have, if the season was good, you'd have this massive amount of chestnuts available in the swamps. And they would actually have whole ceremonies around that time when that food is plentiful. And I'm forgetting the cycad nut, which is really interesting, ancient, very, very ancient plant. They would crack the nuts and make dampers out of it. And this is where some of the confusion comes in for people, because they're making these dampers, so these are simple breads out of a very nutty, as I said, resistant starch rich food. And they're comparing it to flour, and they're seeing flour as the same kind of thing. But yet the nutritional difference between cycad and flour is just, there's no comparison. Flour just has no nutrition compared to a cycad bread. Wow. So they're starting to eat these foods as if they're highly valuable foods, and all they're getting out of it is excess glucose.